Hi everyone, welcome back. I just wanted to take a short break there to get changed and to get back into mode. And welcome back, Tracey Yi, CEO of the Arrivals Element Unit, who obviously just shared that great presentation or that great fireside chat with me, going through a lot of detail on the new Elements division. And Tracey is now here to go through some audience questions, which is really exciting. We had quite a few through during that session, so welcome back, Tracey, and thanks for extending the time a bit with us now. Before we kind of turn to some of those audience questions, we thought it would be nice to bring a little bit to life what Arrival is doing. And so I'm going to share on the screen the interior design of a bus, because I think we agree that this isn't your average bus. And maybe just ask Tracey to just bring that to life a little bit for us, and we can then go through some of the questions.
Yeah, I'm mindful that, we can talk about how cool it is and we do things in a new way and all of that. I think a picture speaks, tells 1,000 words, or whatever the saying is. So good morning, good afternoon, everybody. So this is an interior shot of our bus. We've had a few of these the different angles loaded on our LinkedIn website. And I before I started working here, I have to be honest, I didn't have any true passion for buses, so to speak. But if you look at this thing, I honestly am a bit, I'm sure very, very biased. I think it's really quite beautiful. It's very simple in design. And as you can see, there's loads of glazing kind of all the way around, front and back. That's a view towards the back of the bus. And if you look up on the ceiling, all of that glazing as well. And if you've seen outside visuals of the bus, we've got a very large LCD screen that surrounds the whole vehicle. So I just wanted to kind of share the picture to show you. One of the really interesting things it's very topical at the moment, kind of continuing on the COVID discussion, is our seats are designed on a cantilever arm. So it is very adaptable to slide seats off and remove the seats, so they end up becoming a single seat, or you remove every other rows. And again, obviously, all these things were designed ahead of COVID. But it's when we say we have kind of adaptable designs, I think here's a real live example of that for the current times.
Absolutely. I mean, it is really a beautiful interior there, and it makes me think of two things. One is it's pretty remarkable to think about building all of that locally in many different places, and then we'll come on to that a bit more, because we had some questions in the Q&A on that. But also it gives me a second here to actually plug a little bit more that what we do at Ultima Media. One of our other publication brand platforms is design, is Car Design News. And actually Arrival, I believe some of the design team there has had some involvement, and we've been covering that. And I think a winner of one of our competitions actually joined the Arrival design team. So it's certainly from a great pedigree, and I think the design aspect of Arrival is in and of itself a really interesting and exciting part of what the company's doing. So
I think we talk a lot about I think we talk a lot about technology, but I think the other thing that when I look at that picture is really just the simplicity of design, right? And I don't think when we talk about technology and being good for the environment and all of that, it has to be this laborious thing. It's very pure, it's very simple, and does the job. So anyway, yes, go ahead, Chris.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, great. Fantastic. Thanks for that. So let's go to a couple of the audience questions, and we've had quite a few through, and our platform allows the audience to actually upvote some questions as well. So the most voted question, actually, in terms of people want to know, is about that local supply base strategy, and particularly kind of looking at it today as well versus where it's going. So the question is, the local supply base versus overseas supply base, what's the ratio that you have for the time being, as you kind of move towards that model which you outlined for us?
So if I speak more generally, agnostic of the vehicle, our R&D is headquartered here in the UK in West Kensington. So our engineers are here. Our R&D center is in Banbury, just north of central London. And during prototype stage, as many of your audience will know, you tend to rely on suppliers that are nearby and rely on them. But as we move into production, we are looking to near source where we are producing. So if we get back to the bus, we're going to be starting bus production in the US. That was announced a few months back by our founder. And that bus in the US, we will abide by the Buy America requirements. Those of you who are in the US are probably quite familiar with that. Essentially, whenever you are using governmental funds, federal or state, and typically bus customers, operators tend to be within that, you need to have greater than 70%. This is a very simple summary, but 70% of parts as well as assembly costs in the United States. So we have my supply chain team based here as well as in across America have been looking for supply chains throughout our beta. Ensure we can select down 2 or 3 suppliers who think we can meet all the requirements, send them the latest CAD drawings, whatever we have, so that as soon as we're ready to, and in many cases, we have already started tendering process for some of our long lead items in the United States. So in America, we will absolutely be over 70% of content locally. Obviously, if we are selling to private operators, private companies who want to use them as shuttle buses for their employees, for example, we don't have to abide by that, but it would be far too costly to have 2 separate supply chains for the same part in the same country. So for simplicity's sake, we will be having that at least 70% local content.
Okay, that's fascinating. And then obviously, as you spoke about, the ambition over time is to probably have an even higher localization rate in all the locations.
Absolutely. I mean, it minimizes the total cost, right? We don't have to ship. You have much more available suppliers locally, and again, we're less. Whenever you can try to avoid international shipping, tax, license, and customs, it's one less complexity we can take out of a very complex supply chain.
Absolutely. So another question here, and this was the second most voted, or one of the second. We have a couple of ties for that position. Are you already producing with microfactories, and so how many do you use today?
So we are not. We are building microfactories as we speak, and our vehicles are in prototype stage. So very late stages of prototype. Testing, validations, etc. And so we do have build engineer teams who are building manually within our R&D centers for that process. But when we build our vehicles, it will be in our microfactories, and as I referred to earlier, by robofactoring.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, a couple are already pretty much under construction or being prepared.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. So we have, I'll try and group this together because there's quite a lot of interest around the packaging that you use, or the impact on the packaging from the localization and the sustainability side. So the first question is, well, why did you decide for recyclable instead of reusable packaging, or are you using both? And there's a couple of others. Also, are you considered a concept of pooling, of sharing shared assets, packaging pools?
Absolutely. So apologies if I wasn't clear. We're looking for recyclable and reuse, kind of all the R's. I think, if I'm truly honest, I have people on my team who are much closer to working on the packaging strategy, because we are where we are at our stage. While we've identified suppliers, as you can imagine, we're much more talking about the suitability of that supplier to make our part. The conversation is quite passing in terms of our packaging requirements, right? We say that's what we want, that is a requirement, and all our suppliers, yeah, absolutely. Whatever you guys want to do, you want to manage packaging globally with a provider, and we will be a part of that program, or we can offer something ourselves that meet your requirements. So if I'm really honest, that's really where we are in terms of the packaging discussion. So I probably couldn't give you the kind of rich answers that your audience deserves at this current stage.
That's no problem, and I will just highlight that although there's a few other questions around, packaging for inbound flows, so there's a lot of interest in that. My suggestion would be that we connect the audience to those members of your team who can go into detail on that. And so,
absolutely, I have a gentleman who worked for me who would. I can send you his contact details, Christopher, afterwards. I'm sure he would love to talk about it at length.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're happy to facilitate that. So for all of our packaging gurus out there, we'll make that connection. Right. So we have a couple other questions here. Yeah, please.
We're very much building our strategy, so I think it'd be really valuable for us as well to get the feedback. We know at a high level what we need to do, right? And we'd love to hear experts. And if our strategy can be tweaked, our plans, absolutely, we're very open to that.
Great. Well, we can go one better. We'll liaise after this, as I can make sure we get access to your team to join in the virtual networking here, to contact even directly some of the experts which we have, literally with e-booths and services here. So again, very happy to make those links. So and again, if some of the questions that come in here go in that direction that we need to do, we'll do that. But the question is, what are your plans for after sales, or have you set that strategy yet? Are you also looking to provide, for example, charging support, battery support, and so what potentially would the model of that be?
Sure.
So we've got just a moment's freeze there. I'm sure Tracy will.
That isn't after sales, so they are.
Sorry, it just froze for a second, so I think we might have lost it for a moment there. So just if we can start from the top there again.
Okay, so we have another division in our company called Arrival Solutions, and they're focused on after-sales solutions. So from maintenance to spare parts, etc. So obviously, we work really closely together to identify the spare parts and help negotiate the unit parts to set that up. They're working with maintenance service providers across the globe, kind of big names to partner with. And in terms of charging stations, we, as you can imagine, we're comprehensive. So we have a group in Tel Aviv working on our own charge point solution. And that is very much in prototype stage and development stage at the moment.
I mean, obviously with electric vehicles, it always raises a lot of interesting service models, whether battery swaps and things like that. I'm less familiar with maybe how you'd manage that on a commercial vehicle side. I imagine that in some ways is even more essential, right? Because if the battery or any issues there, then that puts vehicles and business, out of service.
Absolutely. Well, and we are trying to work all of those things out at the moment. We have our partner LG Chem with our batteries. Obviously, we have extended warranty cover on those as well. So, and in terms of the buying model for our batteries, again, it's quite early stages, and I can't quite get into it at the moment. But we want to ultimately make it as accessible as possible. So whether it's allowing people to buy it as a part of a whole vehicle upfront. I mean, obviously, initially our partnerships are with enterprise, other companies, but there will be other buying options, looking at the total cost of ownership and making it accessible for everybody.
Okay, excellent. This is a question, and we touched on this a little bit in when we had our fireside chat, but it's a bit more of the strategic side from Arrival, looking at public transport and the impact of COVID. Is how quickly do you see public transport use bouncing back post-COVID, and is there anything operators or even manufacturers, upcoming manufacturers like yourself, can do to improve that passenger experience to get them back? It's a pretty important point, in terms of where we see across cities right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously simple things like allowing seating to be spaced in a way that abides by the guidance of local governments and on where you 2 meters. That's a critical thing. Having appropriate filters within systems within the vehicle. I think all of those things play a key part. Again, we would probably need to bring in somebody on the bus sales team who could probably speak much more because they talk to the operator, so they would be much closer to understanding what the requirements would be.
Absolutely, and it is something we're learning about, but I think for the moment there was a little freeze again there, but we did understand that you were talking a lot about what can be done in terms of air filtration and the experience there.
I mean, what do you think, Christopher? You know, what are people saying in terms of what are the concerns and what do they think the solutions are? I mean, you know, I guess we're all in this together. What are you hearing?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think right now, you know, from a perspective of London, you know, I think anyone who lives in London and sees it's you know, I took the tube the other day for the first time in quite a few months, and you know, at 8 o'clock in the morning, and 3 people in a carriage, you know, and you know, it's similar with the bus. I think it's I think at a point in which people feel, you know, clearer in what they're supposed to be doing from a government side, frankly, as well. I know this is getting a little off supply chain, but nonetheless, that sort of messaging is important. It's not necessarily clear to people that if they're supposed to go to offices but not group with certain numbers of people and not, and so, you know, people are kind of not necessarily being told, they're kind of being told to avoid it, right? And so that messaging is quite important. But I do think that it's pretty clear from my side, and I hesitate to say this before a huge automotive audience, but I don't think that the solution for our cities is hundreds of thousands more or millions more individual vehicles flooding the streets. So, you know, we do need to get back, and maybe the public transport model will need to shift a bit, be more user friendly, and giving that sense of safety along with it, and the sustainability side. So yeah, I mean, but I think it's a lot of that's to do with people's sense of security, and also, frankly, what their purpose for that is as well. So if we're still not going to offices and other things like that, then that changes it too. But I think we do need to look beyond the pandemic, and the idea that suddenly everybody will have an individual personal mobility solution for all those needs, I don't think is sustainable. So I do think we're right to look beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of suppliers that we speak to kind of unsolicited would say, hey, this is what we've been working on in terms of our product that could potentially help combat. And I think all of those things, you know, being able to kind of have, if you have a bus, again, back to that example, and you have 3 doors, and being able to kind of lock certain doors and have an entry door and an exit door, that seems to be one of the clearest things that, you know, even restaurants, any buildings try to route their customers in a one-way action. So
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Well, it raises a lot of interesting design, perhaps, questions further there too. So there's lots to work out. Another question here, which I think is also a nice one to put in this context, frankly, and this is, what areas are you currently hiring? I mean, Arrival is growing, so you know, are there areas you're particularly looking to grow in your team?
Yeah, absolutely. So if across Arrival, we're always looking for bright engineers, I think, that look at things in a really different way, who has the technical muscles, but have worked in a real innovative environment. I think the startup environment is quite different. I've worked at a lot of large established companies, and even though it's technology and it's considered very agile, I mean, it's nothing like working for Arrival. So I think it's very much people who are resilient. You know, when you, again, in innovation, it's R&D, it's hit and miss, right? You try, you do things in a lot of different ways. So I think the Arrival culture is quite unique. So a lot of engineers, build engineers, as we start staffing up our micro factories. Obviously, while we have RoboFactoring, it does still require support staff. In terms of my organization, supply chain, we have doubled and tripled and continue to need that.
Bit of a lag there.
Again, it doesn't make sense to have people flying all over the world. Sorry, I don't know. why. Sorry if I've got lazy internet today.
No, it's quite all right when we're putting it through its paces, but I believe we did certainly get the message there on what's hiring. Maybe on a related kind of point, does that also mean you're on the hunt for suppliers and logistics partners as well in your organization?
Absolutely. We are currently in the pre-pitch stage, RFQ stage for 3PL providers, transport, logistics, etc. As well as I said, for long lead items, we've already started the tendering process. But some of the shorter lead items, we are very much looking for partners, especially in the US, as we get ready for our bus manufacturing.
Great. So, audience note, that's where we have some needs coming up as now as well. And again,
if I may make a kind of a small plug, if you have any interest, our email address is procurement@arrival.com. It's pretty easy.
Hopefully everyone get that. We'll maybe one of my team who's listening, if you can drop that into the chat right now, and I'm sure it will be flooded with procurement@arrivals.com. Any other comments? So let's see. We're running close on time, but we maybe have time to take one or two more. I like this one. Will we see any iconic red double-decker Arrivals buses in the mobility futures?
I think you'd be a fool to try to replicate that. I'd like to think we could improve on it. So, no, I think it's iconic. I don't want to see it. Do you want to see it everywhere? I kind of love seeing that in London.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like the London, just feels quintessential London. So.
Absolutely. Reference there to the London taxis. Although we should note that the London taxi company, as our friends at Volvo and Geely will tell us, are seeking to export. So there is some room to bring innovation to tradition as well. But let's go. We've got thank you, team. Someone's put the procurement email address into the chat. So do get in touch on that way. And there's also the question, how can potential US partners find out more what you're looking for? Well, that email address is probably a good place to start. But as I mentioned earlier, we are happy to help facilitate, further connections if there's someone more specific in your team that they should be talking to.
And the other thing that we want to do as we get to the kind of right point is we will have a sponsored procurement day in the US and in the UK, where we will invite suppliers. And we will share a little more ahead of time in terms of the type of parts that we are looking for, type of systems we are looking for, and do a bit of screening so that it's not it's a managed group. But we plan on having a supplier day specifically for that. So, and again, as we get that information, I will get that to you, Christopher.
Absolutely. Please do. Wonderful. We've got a few other questions, some of them coming in, but I think we're probably running low on time. I'll raise the question. It might be one for us to tackle at a later time in a bit more depth, but not to put the question. Does the microfactories concept not cause duplication of effort and therefore duplication of cost? So I don't know if you feel you want to take that for at least a bit. I think it's really excited to talk about that as we go, and I'm knocking my green screen back. I have to don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, it's we don't think there is any duplication. It's actually a very small 10,000 square meter footprint where we do the absolute final assemblies by robots. So it's and it allows us, if you think about large mega traditional OEMs, sorry, it looks like we're going over. What typically happens is, you are underutilized until you're at full capacity, and then you have to wait 3 years to build another microfactory, in which case you're again underutilized until you get to full capacity. You're talking about, building factories in less than 6 months to support a customer order, and being able to replicate that as many times as you need, depending on your order book.
Fantastic. Well, again, it's a very interesting concept, and I'm interested to hear more about the debate that it leads to, frankly, for many in the automotive supply chain who maybe struggle to think about how it might work. But, obviously this is why we're excited to keep in touch with you, Tracey, and with Arrival and your division as we go ahead. We'll make those connections, as we said. Thank you so much for all the time you've given us in the Q&A and to answer our audience question. It's definitely proving one of our most interactive and popular sessions, so you can tell the interest is there. It's been great to have you, and we'll be in touch. For our audience now, we're going to close out this session, and then we'll kick off in just a few minutes more. We've got a fascinating session on the arsenal of health, how General Motors worked to transform their supply chain during the pandemic to serve the relief effort. So you won't want to miss that. We'll be back soon, and we'll be hearing more from Tracey in the future as well. Have a great day, Tracey. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Christopher.